Hey guys, welcome back to the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles! Resolve. In the last episode, we finally dragged Dr. Scythe, which is over here on the right, into the witness stand, together with Mr. Drebber. And Madame Tespels is also here, so that's a good news, isn't it? And we are about to cross-examine these three people in the witness stand, so without further ado, let's just get into it. In the cemetery 10 years earlier. The reason I was in Logwood Cemetery all 10 years ago was for a spot of moonlighting, shall we say.
Hold it!
By moonlighting, you mean grave robbing, do you?
Surely you only need to look at the graveyard scene and my appearance to gauge the answer to that.
The lantern and spade.
But who on earth would want to buy a dead body? Any major hospital? A hospital? In order to better understand the human body, the study of anatomy is crucial to medical science. But there isn't a hospital in the world that has enough specimens to work with. Though obviously they can't openly express an interest in obtaining more by dubious means.
As aspiring scientists, we young research students had no money to work with, as I'm sure you can imagine. So we made superstitious arrangements with a hospital where wired some of our medical student acquaintances. We would never take anything of value from the graves. This was all for the furtherance of science, you see. That's what we all told ourselves every time we stole into the graveyard at night, spade in hand.
You realize body snatching is a serious crime. If you were caught, you could expect the gravest of consequences.
We students were caught between the hammer and the anvil. We needed funds to research.
Professor Harebrained said exactly the same.
I'm quite speechless at the apparent levity with which you've revealed the apparent behavior. Well, if you wanted to know why I was there at Lowgate Cemetery, that's the reason. But I never expected to end the way it did. That I regret to this day. Yes, the illustration that newspaper article was based on what I witnessed that night.
Hold it!
The strange happening in Lowgate Cemetery, which you now deny.
Not entirely. I ran to fetch the police at the time, you know. I was shaking like a leaf. But they didn't believe a word of it. In fact, I was very nearly arrested myself.
So you went to the papers instead?
I started big with the London news, but unsurprisingly they didn't want to know either. In the end though, it was reporters from the gossip rags, the gutter press, that came to get my story. And it spread like the plague through the capital, as gossip-hungry Londoners lapped up the table.
The story was in every single paper at the time, with the exception of some broadsheets.
And yet only 2 or 3 of them actually interviewed me personally. Most of the accounts turned out to be very interpretive ghost stories.
What about the article in the Daily Circus?
That particular journalist found me at my dormitory. I don't know how, but he discovered my name. So I recounted to him exactly what had happened that night. And from your description, he drew this illustration? Precisely. That's how I learned that the condemned man was the infamous professor. Because the reporter told me so. I had no idea myself, you see.
Newspaper reporters are wont to snoop around in matters that don't concern them. So the scene portrayed in the illustration is accurate, then?
Well, thinking back now, I realized that I never actually saw the professor at all, though.
Hold it!
Uh-huh. Interesting. What are you talking about?
I think I explained already, didn't I? Lowgate Cemetery is at the rear of Barclay Prison, so it was renowned among our students at the university for being haunted by the ghosts of condemned convicts. For some absurd reason, I was scared of the graveyard at night, and as a result, only too willing to believe that nonsense about the dead coming back to life.
But you said you actually saw it.
I said what I'd seen in my mind's eye. After all, resurrection is impossible, isn't it? You'd have to be unhinged to think otherwise. Unless, of course, you have some evidence that proves I encountered the professor that night.
I don't know. Is there any material evidence that could show how he really did see the professor?
If you have anything at all, Mr. Naruto.
I know, I need to present it against that irritatingly backtracking statement of his.
The point is, that night was a pivotal moment in my life.
Let me think a second. We're not gonna present on this statement, it's just, we do have this camera, right? There's dark staining is visible on the bellows. I mean... It's really weird. So... Okay, let's just press this first.
Soon afterwards, I was visited by a young woman who sculpted a model of me from wax.
Hold it! That young woman being Madame Tussbells, of course.
Precisely. I must say I didn't expect to run into her again like this 10 years later.
Sorry, guys.
As I have explained, I went by the name published in the article and, comme ça, I found the man.
Yes, the article in the Daily Circus, I think you said.
I was a poor student with bravely a penny to my name at the time. And the young lady put £5 in front of me.
So you readily consented to having a waxwork of yourself made and gave permission for it to be put on display.
I did. I should sell what little I had to sell, I concluded.
Ah, oui, I remember now. I purchased something else from you that day, n'est-ce pas?
Did you? I can't say I remember.
What was it, madame?
His camera.
Ah.
Oh yes, I made a point of taking it with me whenever I made an excursion into any cemetery. You took a camera with you, sir? To what end? To record the details of the bodies I disinterred. But I had no intention of ever visiting a graveyard again after that night, so I sold it. I see.
But I still have it, monsieur. It is part of the special exhibit in my House of Horrors. I am very meticulous about such details. It is a Tussbells way. It would seem, then, that this is the very camera Mr. Drebber took with him to Logate Cemetery on the night in question.
Yes, interesting. The details of the camera have been updated in the court record. The actual camera that Mr. Drebber had with him in the cemetery 10 years ago. When the lens is extended, dark staining can be seen on the bellows. Okay, but we're gonna finish this, we're gonna press, and we're gonna see all the dialogue, as always.
Then I gave up on my dream of becoming a scientist, and it was all because of that newspaper article.
Hold it! This article, you mean? Published in the Daily Circus?
Yes, somebody informed the dean that it was my name that appeared in the article. And carelessly let slip that night after night, I was digging up graves. Hardly a model student, you might say. The university's reputation was execrably defiled, and I was expelled as a result.
Mon Dieu, I had no idea.
And having been run out of university, you find employment in a somewhat specialist trade.
You combine your knowledge of science with knowledge of stage magic to create various experimental machines intended to demonstrate never-before-seen technology. And you use those deceptive machines to trick the government and private investors into giving you money. Professor Albert Harebrain was just your latest victim, wasn't he?
Whatever are you talking about? I have no recollection of doing anything of the sort.
What's Drebber up to? Why would he suddenly change his tune and recant his claim?
I wonder if perhaps it's because his circumstances have changed now.
What circumstances?
Well, if he admits to having seen the professor emerging alive from his grave 10 years ago, it will expose a secret in Dr. Scythe's past that you would desperately want to hide.
Yes, of course. If Drebber and Dr. Scythe are working together now, then if Drebber were to betray her, there would be no reason for her to continue to cooperate. In that case, there's only one way around it. I'll have to prove he really did see it. Prove he really did see the professor's corpse coming back from the dead as he originally claimed.
Yes, Mr. Naruto, exactly.
Alright, so I already stated that I think. But before we do that, let's have another look at the camera. Because there was a problem with this. Because if you... Yeah, we had that already, so we can just skip. This is where the photographic plate goes, I think, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Isn't it incredible to think that...
I can't skip right now, sorry.
That is the actual camera Mr. Drebber used that night?
I certainly never imagined a piece of evidence would be on display on Madame Tussbells. She's very keen on everything being as true to life as possible, though, isn't she? And there's also the stain on here, so we don't have to do that once again because when the lens is extended, dark staining can be seen on the bells. So I'm just gonna present this here.
Objection!
Okay, that was wrong. Surely it's something, yeah, okay, that is wrong. But I think it has to do with this camera. Wait a second, so I think this is the fishy one. Okay, let's present...
Objection!
It is just a newspaper? That doesn't make any sense. Sorry, Mr. Drebber, but I don't believe that.
Don't believe what?
Your latest claim. You did see the professor on that night 10 years ago.
Oh dear, we seem to be at odds. But I was there, and you were not. I know what I didn't see.
The illustration with this article was drawn based upon what you told the journalists that you witnessed. A figure emerging from a tomb, wearing an iron mask.
Yes,
When the killer was tried 10 years ago, it was decided in the closed court's ruling that the man would wear the mask to hide his identity. He wasn't to be removed even during his execution and subsequent burial.
not even the prison wardens were to see the man's face. But obviously, the provision of this mask was not public knowledge.
So, Mr. Drebber, as you've just heard, a lowly student of the University of London certainly wouldn't have known about the condemned man's mask. So unless you'd actually seen the professor that night, it's inconceivable that the artist would have included the mask in that illustration.
Order, order! Well, Mr. Drebber, it's a wild scene, isn't it, if you look closely? And as I've already been at pains to point out, I was utterly petrified, which is why I had it in my head that I'd seen such a blood-curdling sight. But afterwards, I came to my senses and realized that I'd been mistaken.
You're still saying you didn't see it?
If you're stubbornly sticking to that story, witness, then amend your testimony to explain exactly how you think your eyes deceived you.
Of course.
only too happy to oblige. I can't believe he's still not going to concede the point. Okay, let's see what he has to say.
What I in fact witnessed was a fellow grave robber at work.
Hold it! A fellow grave robber? What are you talking about?
Well, I wasn't the only one visiting the cemetery that night, you know. Other body snatchers were at work. Of course, when I saw one emerging from the hole he'd dug, my heart very nearly stopped. So that's the terrifying sight I actually saw, you see.
You're claiming it was just another student on equally insalubrious business as yourself?
Many of the medical students would wear metal masks to protect them from bacteria during dissections. Clearly the fellow was using such a mask to protect his anonymity, would you say?
Objection! But there's more to the story, isn't there? The article goes on to say, in the next second, a gunshot rang out suddenly from behind. The bullet pierced the resurrected man's chest, whose breath then stilled once more.
You might assume that the sexton discovered the miscreants at work, perhaps, and fired upon one of them.
If a gravedigger had shot someone in the cemetery, I think it might have been rather big news, my lord.
Oh, yes, well, I can only assume it was an embellishment bolted on later by the reporter.
Aha! Well.
Excuse me.
What do you have to say, Madame Tussbells? Madame Tussbells. Don't take it out on Mr. Sholmes.
Oh la la, pardon. I was lost in my thoughts.
Would it be fair to say that Mr. Drebber's last remark was significant to you in some way?
I thought it was a little strange, that is all. How Monsieur Drebber could claim this now.
If you don't mind me saying, madam, what are you talking about?
Well, when I met you 10 years ago at your university dormitory, you recounted to me about your adventures in the cemetery, no? Including the gunshot.
Stop! You might want to watch your tongue, you know.
Objection!
Have a care, Drebber. That's no way to speak to a lady.
Please, Madame Tussbells, carry on.
Of course. According to what Monsieur Drebber told me at the time, he did hear a gunshot from behind him, and the bullet hit the condemned man.
I said nothing of the sort.
No, you were very explicit about the details. About the mask that the figure was wearing. And the blood that spattered over you when he was shot.
Enough! Shut up, woman! You're making all this up! That will do. Mr. Drebber? Yes. You refute the account just given by Madame Tussbells. I have no recollection of ever saying those things.
Come on, do you really expect us to believe you?
Control yourself, counsel. I will not permit baseless accusations in my courtroom.
Right.
Under the circumstances, I think it is best that you supplement your testimony with a statement to clarify your position on this witness. Well, very well.
We have him on the edge.
There was no gunshot from behind me at all, nor any splattering blood.
We know that is not true. We are going to present, but first we're going to press, of course. Yet Madame Tussbells has testified that you told her about both of those details.
Not true. I said nothing of the sort.
10 years have passed. Without material evidence to the contrary, you have no grounds on which to question the witness's word.
Tell me, Madame Tussbells.
Oui.
What exactly did Mr. Drebber say about the blood that apparently spattered on him?
Alors, this is what he told me. All of a sudden, he heard a very loud gunshot from behind his back. The bullet hit his figure who was emerging from the tomb in the middle of the chest, in his heart.
One dreadful sight after another.
and since Monsieur Drebber was at the time facing towards the condemned man, the blood sprayed from the wound and spattered on his body. That is what he told me.
So, not an experience you would ever forget, is it?
Precisely, and I didn't forget it, because I've already said it never happened in the first place.
He's clearly lying. If only I had some evidence to prove it. Oh, Rinosuke, come on.
We can't let him win, Mr. Naruto. So we mustn't overlook a single detail, no matter how small.
Alright, so... Okay, we are going to present the camera here. There is blood splatter on it, so... There we go! And we are right, apparently. Mr. Drebber, do you remember this camera? Just a second. My mouse now it moves. Okay, so everything is fine, I guess. Cool.
But that is the camera from that fateful night.
Yes, we borrowed it from the House of Horrors. It's the camera you took with you to the cemetery that night, Mr. Drebber.
And? Is that supposed to be significant?
This kind of camera is rarely seen in our homeland, so my colleague and I were keen to examine it closely. We noticed that the lens extends forward on the end of some bellows. Like this.
Hold it!
What's that there, just on the bellows? It looks like a dark red stain.
That's right. It's a rather conspicuous mark here on the bellows, in fact.
Good lord, are you suggesting?
Yes, my lord. It would appear to be a spatter of blood.
Something that could be confirmed with a simple chemical test. Isn't that right, Dr. Sai?
It would be difficult to determine if it was human blood and not the blood of some animal.
But yes, to test whether or not it's blood at all is simple enough.
I propose that Madame Tuspel's testimony was corrected, and that on the night in question 10 years ago, you were spattered with blood from the gunshot wound.
Well,
And that furthermore, you really did witness the condemned professor emerging from his tomb. There's simply no way you could have forgotten such a traumatic experience. In other words, the only explanation is that you're trying to hide the fact that you saw the professor that night.
Objection!
But why? Why would he want to do that?
Well, not for his own gain, it would seem.
For whose then? Who could benefit?
Mr. Drebber is obviously lying in order to protect somebody.
my goodness, he's shielding someone?
Yes, my lord, and clearly, it's someone who doesn't want the truth about the professor's coming back to life to be exposed.
Well, counsel, who is it then? Who is this witness trying to protect by lying about what he saw that night?
Yeah, it clearly is Dr. Scythe, right?
Take that!
The obvious answer is Dr. Scythe.
Scythe?
Whatever do you mean?
Imagine if the convict who had been sentenced to death was not in fact killed. Imagine if that was to come to light.
What are you insinuating?
And imagine if the convict in question was the country's most hated mass murderer. If it was the professor.
That would be an unprecedented scandal.
Objection!
This is beyond a joke. Need I point out that the dead cannot come back to life? What you're suggesting would mean that the execution never actually happened.
Yes, that's exactly what I would mean.
Objection!
Once a man is sent to the gallows, he hangs. No one could escape, not in Great Britain.
Objection!
But the fact is, there was a witness to the fact that the man did escape his hanging.
If that were really true, counsel, the implications of misconduct would not stop at the supervising coroner. It would taint the honor of the entire judiciary from the ground up.
And it's exactly because of those monumental repercussions that Dr. Scythe would consent to any demand made of her by someone who threatened to expose the secret, even if that meant being complicit in a crime.
You mean?
I mean that Dr. Scythe wasn't collaborating with Mr. Drebber's wicked scheme. She was coerced into collaborating in order to protect her decade-old secret. She switched the dead body of Mr. Asman with the waxwork model and fabricated the autopsy report. Oh! Lord Van Zeeks!
Pray forgive my freshly filled hallowed chalice, and a whole raft of other discourtesies now.
Goodness me!
It's just the sort of telltale Londoners would enjoy, I grant you. An executed killer rising from the dead, a Scotland Yard cover-up, a conspiracy at the highest level. So let me ask you one thing.
What's that?
If the condemned man really did emerge from his tomb that night only to be shot in the chest, who pulled the trigger and disposed of him forever?
Well, I have no idea at the moment.
We have too little information to work that out at present, I think.
I couldn't agree more.
The Old Bailey is no place for wild fantasies. And have you considered this, my learned Nepalese friend?
Considered what?
Do you realize just what a dangerous endeavor it would be to coerce this woman into such criminal activity? It's tantamount to declaring war on the entire British police force and judiciary.
Quite hard to imagine any sum of money being offered for research could warrant it.
To rely on some stage deception when so much is at stake would be madness.
Well, I suppose...
And this was not petty crime either. The victim was murdered. A man who had already invested money in the venture and would be instrumental in future profits too.
Yes, I had no reason to kill Mr. Asman at all. Or are you forgetting that his death results in me receiving not a single penny? The court is already aware of the contract between myself and the victim, no.
This is really, really strange. Okay, let's just get going, I guess then. I'm just trying to figure out what is going on. It's really convoluted and really captivating. Okay, sorry guys. I think you see it the same way. It's really captivating. So let's just get going. There is the contract. That's very true. The motive for this case runs deep, though. I can feel it.
Using threats to force the head of the forensic investigation team to cooperate is extreme. Especially for a government grant he had no guarantee of receiving in the first place.
If the research grant was the aim, taking Mr. Asman's life would have made no sense anyway. Which means Mr. Drebber's motive wasn't money at all. It was just trying to kill Mr. Asman. But why? What was his motive then?
Your time is up, my learned friend. I'd say you have one last chance before the jury lose their patience with this charade. Let's see if you can back up your heady proposal, shall we? How do you explain why this engineer would throw all caution to the wind and threaten his own country?
At this point, I'm not prepared to listen to more of this outlandish conjecture without proof. So, counsel, present your evidence.
Alright, who exactly was Mr. Asman to Drebber? There is a connection there that no one's seen yet. And I'm going to have to present 2 pieces of evidence to show what it is. Yes, my lord. The evidence that establishes a motive and explains why the witness wanted the victim dead is right here. Alright guys, but we have reached the half-hour mark already. And, well, if you want to see how I'm going to fare, because I have no clue what we are supposed to show here. I have no clue at all. You'll have to tune in next time for the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Resolve. See you then.